Portland, Vancouver, the #1 news station for Oregon and Southwest Washington. Mark Endress, Randy Querin with weather, and Pat Hillberg sports. Newsroom 6 at 11.
It's a weekend of protests at home and abroad. A new chairlift gets a workout this weekend on Mount Hood. And for the first time in 14 years, the Oregon State Beavers have the bragging rights. Good evening. Former President Jimmy Carter confirms that he wrote a letter to the Ayatollah Khomeini, but says he did it in response to an initiative from Iran. Iran radio reports that Khomeini rejected an offer from Carter to help free the American hostages in Lebanon. Carter made public the text of the letter. In part of the letter, the former president offered his services as a neutral U.S. channel. Khomeini also denies any connection between Iran and the hostages in Lebanon. Some Ethiopians living in Portland gathered today to talk about a tragedy and discuss ways to prevent another one. Last Sunday, Ethiopian Mulugeta Sarah was beaten to death outside his home, apparently by members of the white supremacist skinhead gang. The Ethiopian Community Cultural Organization called today's meeting to talk and to show unity.
We don't want vigilantism. What we want is we want to, cooperate with the law enforcement, but at the same time pressure the officials to make sure that, these people are brought to justice.
The Ethiopians also say they deeply appreciate the support they've received following the attack on Sarah. 125 protesters were arrested in Hartford, Connecticut today. Most of them were part of Operation Rescue. They carried out their protest outside an abortion clinic. This demonstration is part of a continuing abortion protest that began with the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta. Hartford was not the only place where demonstrators were taken to jail. All told, about 300 abortion opponents were arrested today. There were also protests in Alabama and New York. And thousands of South Korean protesters are calling for the arrest of former President Chun Doo-hwan. The demonstrators hurled firebombs and rocks at police as they marched through Seoul. They demand Chun's arrest for alleged abuses during his term of office. In Yugoslavia, hundreds of thousands of Serbs demonstrated today. They are demanding greater control of their province. At the same time, their opponents, ethnic Albanians, held a rally of their own. Officials in Argentina say it apparently was a heart attack that killed Christina Onassis. Onassis is the daughter of the late Greek shipping tycoon Aristotle Onassis. Christina Onassis was 37 years old. Some radioactive medical supplies turned up this morning on a sidewalk in northwest Portland. Apparently, no one was harmed by them. Authorities say the medical waste was dumped there by car thieves. The materials had been locked in the trunk of a car which was stolen this morning from a disposal company parking lot. Experts say the materials had been used for diagnostic imaging. Police are still looking for the car and the people who stole it. It was a wet weekend in the south, and the state of Arkansas was caught in the middle of a downpour. Record rainfall drenched the state today. At least 9 inches of rain hit the Little Rock area. That surpassed the old record by 2 inches. No serious injuries reported in the flood, but many streets were impassable. With a blast from a blowtorch, officials at Mount Hood Meadows cut the ribbon, so to speak, for a new chairlift and 9 new ski runs. The lift chairs seat 4 skiers at a time, the mountain's first quad lift. It takes skiers to the new Shooting Star complex, 9 runs over 150 acres, built for those of intermediate or advanced ability. Managers of the ski area say they have many more expansion plans.
In the Pacific Northwest, actually, growth is somewhat limited because there's not enough supply of terrain and lifts such as this. And as long as the public supports us, we're going to continue to expand like this.
Skiers at Mount Hood Meadows also will find a new parking lot near the resort. Pat Hillberg is here with great news for Beavers fans tonight.
Been a long time coming, Even after sitting out in the bad weather, cold weather, rainy weather, it was worth it for the Oregon State fans. We'll tell you about the Civil War and everything else that happened today coming up next. Had to happen sooner or later. The Oregon State Beavers had to one day beat the Oregon Ducks, and that one day was today. The Beavs used a couple of big plays and a terrific performance from Pat Chafee to dump the Ducks 21-10 at OSU. Now, what do you do to keep warm on a cold day in Corvallis? You play past the co-ed. She was last seen somewhere near Philomath. Beavers got the jump in this one. Brian Taylor said, "Catch me if you can." No one could. Taylor breezed on in, and OSU led 7-0 right off the bat. The Ducks answered with a field goal, and then they got their defense back together. Horton knocked it loose from Eric Wilhelm. Scott Whitney pounced on it for the Ducks. 3 plays later, Derek Lavelle got a hold of it for Oregon. 12 yards and a nice jump later, Lavelle was in. The Ducks held the lead at halftime, 10-7. Things really bogged down in the third quarter. Both defenses put the clamps on the other team's offenses. Nothing shaken until the fourth period when Eric Wilhelm finally hooked up on a long one. Wilhelm found Bryant Hill over the middle. The Beavers were poised on the doorstep, and a few plays later, they walked on through. Pat Chafee scored. The flag was on Oregon, disregarded. The Beavs led again, 14-10. Pete Nelson started at quarterback for Oregon, but he was hurt. Freshman Bob Brothers replaced Nelson and had a dismal time. Brothers threw this one right to Oregon State's Billy Hewley. This interception clinched things for the Beavers, but just for good measure, Chafee broke one, scored the final touchdown, and soon thereafter, the celebration was on.
I got bragging rights for a lifetime now. Bragging rights that I went out beating the Ducks, and I'll never lose to them again. So that's the best record I'll ever own.
Wilhelm finishes the Pac-10's all-time passing leader. The Ducks aren't finished yet. They will take a 4-game losing streak into a game at Hawaii in 2 weeks. It's 1 down, 3 to go as the Portland State Vikings aim for the NCAA Division II National Championship. The Vikings took care of their first playoff opponent today. They bounced Bowie State. Vikings didn't know much about Bowie State, but they knew that the Bulldogs could run. That was confirmed early on. Bowie State's Butch Wilson broke it inside the PSU 5 and led to a field goal, and it was 3-0 Bowie State. Now, I can tell you from experience that on a cold day, Civic Stadium is probably the coldest place in town, thus the small crowd. But the elements did not slow down the Portland State attack. You know who that is. Curtis Delgado danced his way inside, setting up a Portland State touchdown, and the Vikes led 7-3. In the second quarter, Chris Crawford to Barry Naoni. Naoni took the tight end screen pass and motored in. The Vikings were on top 17-3. You don't get to the playoffs if you can't play defense, and the Vikings can. Dominique Hardeman and Tim Upshaw grabbed that Bulldog by his flea collar. But the defense wasn't perfect. Bowie State's Clarence Boykins ran this one in. Portland State's lead was just 10 points in the third quarter. But the Vikes put it away soon thereafter. This pass looked like it would never come down, but it did, right in Greg Evers' hands. Portland State led by 17, and then put the padlock on it when Burnell Harvin bombed in. The Vikes won it 34-17. Next week, the Vikings will host another playoff game. PSU will host Jacksonville State, a team from Alabama. Today, Jacksonville State scored 63 points in winning their game back east. Think it was cold at Civic Stadium? Well, check this out. This is Pullman. No amount of fortification could ward off the cold, but several thousand students fortified themselves anyway. Washington against Washington State. The Huskies threatened to dash away in the early goings. Vince Weathersby dodged the snowflakes to make it 7-3 Huskies. The Cougars tried to rally, but no. Lee Lo Lang picked off the Wazoo pass, and he took it and was in like Flint. Washington led Washington State by 12 points at halftime. But the Cougars turned it around in the fourth quarter, and this was a huge play. Washington State blocked the punt. The Cougars were in business at the Husky 12-yard line. A few plays later, quarterback Tim Rosenbaugh took it in himself. The Cougars were clinging to a 1-point lead, 32-31. But 1 point turned out to be enough. Lo and behold, Washington State's defense didn't give up anything. So the Cougars held on for the 1-point victory. Mayhem broke out in the Palouse. The Washington State Cougars are going to the Aloha Bowl. Tough day for goalposts. The Washington Huskies aren't going to any bowl. That's too bad, huh? The man on the spot in today's USC-UCLA game was Rodney Peete. Peete had spots earlier this week. He had the measles, but he was strong enough to throw this touchdown pass and to run for another and to lead the USC Trojans past UCLA and into the Rose Bowl. The Saturday college football numbers 31-22 USC. Next week for the Trojans, Notre Dame. It was 32-31 Cougs over the Huskies. Stanford tied California. Notre Dame easily over Penn State. Miami even more easily over Louisiana State. Fourth-ranked West Virginia stopped ninth-ranked Syracuse. Nebraska edged Oklahoma. Michigan nipped Ohio State in a thriller. Oklahoma State's Barry Sanders just keeps on rolling toward a possible Heisman Trophy. Clemson 29, South Carolina 10. And in the comeback of the day, Oregon Tech made up a 35-7 halftime deficit to knock off PLU in the NAIA playoffs. The good news for the Boston Celtics tonight, Larry Bird underwent surgery on both of his heels, and the surgery was, quote, very successful. The bad news, the earliest Bird can return to the Celtics lineup, 4 months. They originally thought he'd be back in 3 months. And if tonight's play is any indication, the Celtics will miss Bird and miss him badly. Those are the lowly Washington Bullets flying past the Celts. And no problems, the Celtics will just go to one of their other big guns, but those guns were missing. Sorry about that, Pax. The Bullets bounced Boston. Rest of the Saturday night NBA numbers, Hawks hammered Golden State, Cleveland by 7 over Milwaukee. The final was 108-104 Bullets. So much for the Pistons' perfect record. Houston handed Detroit its first defeat. The Knicks outlasted the Sixers, lots of points in that one. The expansion Hornets won their first 2 games, or have their first 2 wins of the season. Denver demolished the Clippers. The mailman delivered for the Jazz. Utah beat Phoenix. Mavericks stopped Seattle. The Indiana Pacers are still looking for a win. And tomorrow night, the Blazers try to get back on track when they host the New Jersey Nets. And now for something completely different. On the island of Maui today, Bob Gilder tried to win his first PGA tournament in 5 years. As he stiff-armed his way up the 18th fairway, you know the long victory drought was on Gilder's mind. But he didn't choke. On the contrary, Gilder knocked in a birdie to finish it. Bob Gilder won the Kapalua International by 2 strokes. First prize, $150,000. Not a bad way to end the drought, Bob. Tomorrow afternoon, the Portland Pilots play the biggest game in their career, biggest game in the history of college soccer in Oregon. The Pilots host UCLA in the first round of the NCAA soccer playoffs. They'll kick it off at 1 at the Portland campus. The girls' high school championship was on the line tonight at the stadium. Sunset against Beaverton. Sunset held a 1-0 lead until Tiffany Andrews outran the ball and the defense. This made it a tie game. Not for long, because just a few minutes later, Tiffany Andrews again. Beaverton nipped Sunset 2-1 to win the girls' AAA high school soccer title. Jesuit beat Beaverton 2-0 to win the boys' title, and the Winterhawks shut out Brandon 3-zip.
All right, thank you, Pat. Next, we'll take a look at the weather, but first, here is a look at the winning lottery numbers for tonight. Randy Quirren has laryngitis tonight. He's not able to put together a forecast. I should say he is able to put it together. He just can't say any of it, so I get to do that tonight. Here are the current conditions. It is cloudy with rain in places, 48 degrees in Portland right now. Windy with gusts coming out of the south. And as you can see, our high temperature today is 47 degrees, a low of 39, and those numbers just keep falling as time moves along. Cold front is passing over the state at this moment, bringing rain and mountain snow. Now, the rain is going to stop tomorrow. You can see the blue sky on the left of all the clouds there. Next front should be coming through on Monday. There's the front as it passes over the central part of Oregon. Let's see if I can get his computer to change pictures. There we go. High temperatures today, 47s all the way down the Willamette Valley and in Seattle today. A little bit warmer than it has been on the east side of the state. 24-hour precipitation, as you can see, a great deal of rain, most of that falling in the Hoquiam area where they had more than 1.25 inches. The road report, essentially the same as it was yesterday. Carry traction devices in a couple of places. The only place they're required is a timberline. Marine forecast, as you can see, for winds west 10 to 20 knots and seas at 4 feet. Tonight, rain. Most places all around the state. Snow on the southeastern corner. Tonight, low temperatures, you can see 20 in Salem. Tomorrow, decreasing showers on the coast as that front moves its way on through. A chance of snow on the east side. The high temperatures tomorrow in the 50s west side, 40s east side. Portland and Vancouver, tonight, occasional showers. Chance of rain 80%. Tomorrow, clearing in the afternoon. And the extended forecast, as you can see, it's going to rain. It is going to rain. We don't need Randy to tell us that tonight. Going to be wet for the next few days. Guess who arrived at Washington Square today just in time for the Christmas shopping season? The man in red himself. Santa even got a jump on Thanksgiving this year as he rode to the square in a one-horse open sleigh. Santa will take up residence in the mall near Nordstrom until Christmas Eve, which is just 35 days from now. Carrie White is officially the oldest person in the world, and she has the certificate to prove that she is 114 years old. She received the certificate from the Guinness Book of World Records. They threw a special party for her yesterday at her Florida nursing home, Aides at the nursing home say the oldest woman in the world still enjoys taking a pinch of Red Man chewing tobacco now and then. Coming up, we'll take a look at how history may look at the Kennedy administration. How many Seattle City light workers does it take to screw in a light bulb? 24. That's how many have been assigned to light up the city's new Westlake Park for the holidays. The city ordered 800 strings of Christmas lights. When the lights arrived, each strand came with 25 sockets, 25 empty sockets. So city workers have 19,800 light bulbs to screw into place. The bulbs were packed separately so they would not break during the trip. Tuesday is the 25th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The 3 years he served as president are considered sometimes the stuff of legend from his admirers. But Bob Franken reports that history may take a different view of JFK as a president.
One part of the Kennedy legend is hard to dispute. He was an inspiring speaker.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Historians are still trying to decide what Kennedy did for his country. John Kennedy became president as the civil rights movement gained momentum.
And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
But civil rights leaders who met behind the scenes with the president and his brother Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, say they had to be dragged to the forefront.
It was a hard thing getting Bobby Kennedy, who was a point person on this, to the point where he recognized, as I kept telling him, that this was not just a crisis, but it was an opportunity.
In foreign policy, the Kennedy administration had a mixed record. It was JFK who created the Peace Corps, which sent thousands of young people to carry American goodwill overseas. And John Kennedy personally inspired millions around the world.
In the world of freedom, the proudest boast is, Ich bin ein Berliner.
But the Berlin Wall had been constructed during the Kennedy presidency by a defiant Soviet Premier Khrushchev. And the failed invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs in April 1961 was a clear disaster. But Cuba also provided a public relations success for President Kennedy 18 months later, when the Russians blinked and agreed to withdraw their missiles.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response.
Still, there are some who believe it was not the U.S. victory it seemed. In fact, behind the scenes, the Soviets got Kennedy to change policy and acknowledge Fidel Castro as the legitimate ruler of Cuba.
A Kennedy critic today might say that American problems in Central America had more than a little to do with the fact that Kennedy was willing to see Cuba remain as a Soviet client state.
However, by 1963, Kennedy could claim a genuine foreign policy success when the United States and Soviet Union agreed on the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty.
Negotiations were concluded in Moscow on a treaty to ban all nuclear tests in the atmosphere, in outer space, and underwater.
Many of the decisions which trapped America in the Vietnam War were made by a John F. Kennedy struggling to defend U.S. interests in far-off Southeast Asia.
We have increased our training mission. We've increased our logistic support. We are attempting to prevent a communist takeover of Vietnam.
But critics of Kennedy say his decisions created the Vietnam mess, later blamed on Lyndon Johnson.
When Kennedy died, we had a major commitment to Vietnam that really was an ongoing commitment.
While the legend of John Kennedy may not be matched by his record, there is little doubt his presidency created symbols that lasted long after his death.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
The American space program Kennedy so vigorously championed came to represent America's determination and soaring spirit. But to some degree that spirit was broken because the very symbol of the country's bright future was snuffed out. Bob Franken's The White House.
There is no question about this president's place in history. Abraham Lincoln arrived by train this afternoon in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Not really, but it was as close as they could come to the real thing. And James Getty, who played the part of our 16th president, delivered one of the most famous speeches in American history.
7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure.
Today is the 125th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address. President Lincoln delivered the address at the formal dedication of a 17-acre cemetery for the soldiers at the Battle of Gettysburg. The Rice University homecoming queen will be making the trip to the Cotton Bowl this year. There was a big stir about it because the homecoming queen is a he, not a she. It turns out that a compromise was reached, though. Michael Grubbs, the homecoming queen, will serve as an escort to the runner-up. The fact that Grubbs was selected homecoming queen at Rice is a surprise to everyone except students at Rice. In the past, they have also elected a dog and a refrigerator as the homecoming queen. And that's our program tonight. Speaking of strangeness, We're Making Movies is coming up next. Stay tuned for that. That's actually coming up next week. Oh, let me get this right. That's next week. Tonight, Dallas. It's the episode that the Blazer basketball game preempted yesterday. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow at 5. Good night.